Hi, welcome to the Gene Keys with Monifa, your path to vocal superpower. So, I decided to start this series for several reasons, but mostly I wanted to share something I loved with my audience. And this is something I set up so that I could have the time and space to really sit with the Gene Keys and get to know them even more deeply and invite you to come along with me in that experience. So, one of the reasons why I feel like it's important to go through all the keys, even though all the keys aren't in your human design chart or in your gene key chart, is because we actually interact with all these energies all the time as part of the energies that we experience day to day and through each other. The more that we get to know them, the more we get to just be more compassionate for each other and to realize, and even when we're maybe not in our highest vibration. So it's something that I love to help me understand myself and the world better. What I love about the Gene Keys is that it talks about our energy in a way that helps us see the the best possible scenario, but also connect that to what may not look so good. So in low vibration, that energy looks way different, but it doesn't mean that the energy is wrong. It doesn't mean necessarily that we are wrong either. It's just a way of pointing to what is possible, and that same energy in its highest expression is what we're looking for. And it's really nice to know that you can find in yourself in a moment of low vibration and then think of the potential there if you're able to shift into a state of higher vibration. And the work that I do helps you do that. And so it helps you also to know kind of how to generate that on purpose. And so I find it's a very close tie to the work that I do with my clients. This is a very beneficial path to embark on together. We're starting with the purpose sphere because it's the purpose, because, why we're here, what we are doing, and how we are made is what we are trying to do more of every day, right? To be more ourselves in the best possible light. And so, purpose sphere really points essentially why we do what we do at a base level of energy. When we talk about the gene keys, if you read the full book, you'll see that each key has an amino acid associated with it. And that's because it's talking about the amino acid associated with that energy in the DNA strand. So the DNA strand is made up of amino acids, and that's how it's talking about those correlations in the purpose of that amino acid, or kind of the evolution of that amino acid as it's been used in our human existence. So that's pretty cool. What I like to say is what we are is why we are. So, how we are made up literally in the cells of our body is informing us every day of what we are here to do on the planet. And so when you look into these deep dives of ancient wisdom, like astrology, like human design, like gene keys, what you're doing is you're remembering aspects of humanity, and there's going to be some of those aspects are going to be familiar, and some aren't, right? And so it's always good to just see which ones resonate with you, because you'll see and you'll start to see how a lot of your ideals line up with these essential understandings and wisdoms of being human. I usually introduce people to gene keys through my vocal superpower chart. It has 3 keys that are associated with the spheres that I feel really show how we are self-expressing. So that's what I work with. I work with voice and having confidence and speaking up and about our vision for the work that we're here to do in the world. And the more that we spend time with these with these elements and energies of ourself, and we really cultivate them, we can amplify that energy. And then the people that are meant to be impacted by our work get to be impacted by our work. And if you want to learn more about the Vocal Superpower chart, feel free to click the link in the description box. And it really is a great way to get started because it's a lot of information. You're trying to take everything in at once. You're welcome to do that through the website link, the Gene Keys website link. That's also in the description box. I guess you started, and we can talk directly about how to have more confidence living out your work. So there are 3 levels to the Gene Keys. And this again is why I think it's so powerful, because on the first level, there's the shadow. And the shadow has a repressive side and a reactive side. And what it's doing is it's showing you what that energy looks like when it's in a low vibration, right? And so it's usually the stuff that we're not too proud of, right? So what we can know is that there's nothing wrong with that shadow. You'll notice there's words associated with each. There's nothing wrong with that shadow, but at the same time, it's probably not where we want to hang out, right? So you're usually looking to move into the gift. So there's the gift, there's the second level. And the gift is essentially what the shadow unlocks, because when we start to recognize that shadow, then we can know that there's potential for the gift, right? And that gift is the high vibrational energy. It's the high possibility for that energy and what it's meant to be doing, when we're not in reaction. A lot of times we're in reaction out of trauma, and anything that we have learned to do to protect ourselves from that trauma is usually what's coming out in low vibration, right? So instead of repression of that experience or that reaction of that experience, it's living the highest energy. The third level is the city. So the city is, I kind of always talk about like the highest expression of that energy in service to the world. That's the best way I can explain it. It's really in service to the universe, and especially for some keys. But that's the closest I can get in a short description, because these ideas aren't necessarily meant to be esoteric, but they can feel that way if we're not familiar with them. So that's about as close as I get in a short description. So, a quick caveat, I just want you to know that when I'm talking about these gene keys, I'm exploring them with you. And like most intuitive and spiritual contemplative work, it changes. It can be different today than it would be if I did it tomorrow. It can be different, in an hour from now than if I do it right now. So, number one, that is not the only way to speak of and talk about the gene keys. I do quote from Richard Rudd a bit, and a lot of it also, I'm also incorporating my experience and my stories so that I'm living and having an experience with that energy. And then at the end, I'm doing a vocal contemplation on that for further integration of that understanding. And so I invite you to, I invite you to do the same. Think about how these energies have played out, maybe in your life, maybe in loved ones' lives, or maybe in just your experience of watching it on the television and hearing stories about people that have acted in these energies, right? And what it'll do is, again, let you know what, again, the higher potential for that is. So it invites that compassion again. And then it also helps you know how close are you to that energy. Do you feel like it's something that you want to cultivate that gift because it's that close to what, like who you are and who you are, like really who you're meant to be, but maybe in the beginning it'll feel like who you desire to be. So what is vocal superpower? Why are we going there? Vocal superpower is just a place where you can feel completely connected to your voice, that it's not intimidating to you to use your voice when it's time to use your voice, and that you feel powerful in the use of your voice. Your voice is meant to be the instrument of creation, of initiating the things that you are creating and want to see happen in the world. So if you don't feel that you can do that yet, then vocal superpower is that ability to do that, letting it be the instrument of your impact through your vision or your business or the impact you can make speaking your story into the world. Key 61 is the shadow of psychosis, the gift of inspiration, and the city of sanctity. So the shadow of psychosis is is pretty deep, right? That we're talking the low vibrational energy, but even with that, our societal definition of psychosis is mental defection or derangement, right? It's considered to be pretty far off the scale of what's normal for humanity. Richard Rudd, the writer of Gene Keys, would argue that psychosis is the norm for most humans. And it's because of the definition of psychosis that includes a break with reality. And our break with reality is that most people question our own existence, right? So we're always questioning, why are we here? What are we here for? What's important, like that kind of thing. But it's the root question is why. That root question is why. And he talks about all the other questions, how, what are derivatives of why. And that why question is what permeates our entire undertaking of understanding the world and our existence, right? My opinion is that all of the ologies are a why question, the study of, right? The study of religion, the study of science, the study of the earth, the study of, they call it genealogy, this kind of thing. All of that is trying to answer that question of why. Why are we here? What are we? What are we here to do? Like in that purpose question, which is why I think it's perfect that we're doing the purpose sphere, right? So one of the things that comes up while we're defining it in the Gene Keys is the programming partner 62, which the shadow of 62 is intellect. Now, that intellect is really about this pressure to figure things out and to find and know the answer, like know the answer absolutely. And this desire to figure out keeps us in the brain, thinking, perceiving without really allowing us to have a true experience of things in reality. And so if we're caught up in our thoughts, a lot of times we can again kind of start this slippery road down into psychosis, because you can think whatever you want to think and you can deceive yourself with untruths as long as you can think up a premise of why they are true, right? So it's like kind of this slippery slope that starts much earlier in Richard Rudd's mind than it does in our medical definition of psychosis, right? And the ancient civilizations, they called this the Maya, which is the great illusion. What drives humanity is this desire to really answer these questions through religion and science, right? And when we're talking about religion, one of the trips that happens is when we turn religion into worship. And so this and many of the Gene Keys will bring up questions about how we act in our spirituality, how we are religious in our spirituality, how do we set up our belief systems. So if you're not willing to ask those questions and have that conversation with yourself and introduce new ideas, then Gene Keys probably isn't going to be a place for you, right? Like, so this is kind of a warning that this may trigger you if you have deep deeply held beliefs and aren't willing to question them. And that I'm okay with that. I don't feel like you have to believe anything that's being said. I know a lot of religions, it would seem blasphemous to introduce any other ideas, right? So if that's your take, then maybe this isn't the place for you. But the concept is essentially that worship puts you in a low vibration perspective because you're automatically coming from a place where something is higher than you. So you're worshiping something higher than you, right? And that brings a perspective of victim or victimhood. And from Richard Rudd's words, is there's a difference between worship and devotion. And devotion contains a seed of dissolution. So dissolution being that it dissolves this idea of separation, right? And so, and again, if you're willing to kind of like bring this into your understanding, even if you do believe in a higher power, that most of those beliefs also believe that that higher power is within you. Yeah, so that's separation causing duality and keeping us in a perspective that we can never be the fullness of what we're here to be. Maintaining that duality can lead to a spiritual or mental breakdown or a breakthrough. So when we're using science to answer these questions, it has its own kind of slippery slope, which we're using logic and creating closed circuit systems of experimentation. It's essentially what the quote is from Richard Rudd is essentially causing and inventing dimensions that cannot be seen or proven, right? On the repressive side, it's called disenchanted. On the repressive side of the shadow energy, it turns away from the pressure of asking that question of why and how. Absolutely, completely. It just stops asking. When you're asking, you usually, we're not talking about asking somebody else, right? We're not, we're talking about having our own questioning, right? And in our own experience. And often, again, the way I introduced it in the beginning is that brings up that are you willing to question, because it's very scary, because essentially it's challenging your experiences of childhood and everything that you've built, the stability of what you know from childhood. And so it can be very hard to question those things, right? That same conditioning that we get in childhood, a lot of times when we're in the repressed side, we're saying, I opt out of asking completely. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to challenge my childhood. I'll just pick one of the systems that have already been set up that I can trust because my mom's mom believed in it and my dad's dad believed in it. And that can be through education, that can be religion, that can be science, right? So science is not excluded from belief systems because a theory is just a theory. So if you're holding theory as truth, as how you're building your understanding of how things work in the world, then it can be as slippery a slope as any other belief system. The question will never actually go away. So what ends up happening in this repressive shadow is that this feeling of being unfulfilled and restless. The reactive side is called fanatical. So the fanatical part of the shadow is obsessed with the question of why, right? It knows that it has no other alternative than figuring this thing out. And it brings us into the state of being fixed on one theory or another. And you're going to find an intellectual answer to that question. You're going to reason why that answer is right. And then you build, again, a reality around that. And so what happens is that your whole thought process, world, survival technique is built around that reality, and it becomes something that cannot be questioned. That if it's questioned, then the whole of your existence is being questioned. And so this is where we get a lot of the sense of people eventually becoming missionaries, because that pressure to be right drives this kind of need to get more people that agree with you. Underlying that is this insecurity that continually bubbles up and often leads to anger and being angry. So again, it's just a way to think in. Do you get angry around your belief systems? Do you get mad at somebody for not believing what you believe? And if it does, then a lot of this low vibrational shadows showing up, and how can you integrate and heal that is would be a question that I would ask myself. This is an experience that I have had. This is actually one of my gene keys as well. So definitely this is my story coming up. I was very much looking for that answer, not making a career out of it, but definitely choosing sides, in religion and science and education. And only through my desire to continue to question until truth was evident is what kind of led me out of that low vibration Maya, right? So, and the gift is inspiration. So, the same energy, there's nothing wrong with the shadow, it's just pointing to a possibility of the gift. So, inspiration. So, when you stop worshiping and start becoming and integrating the the sanctity of God. And it's interesting that sanctity is the city. So it's interesting that that word came to me. Inspiration comes from the Latin spiritu. And so spiritu is about breath. So inspiration referring to allowing breath to infiltrate the fabric of our being and our reality. And the 61 hexagram in the I Ching, which is also related and is part of, again, how the synthesis of gene keys was created, is inner truth. Right. So the truth that resides deep within us. And like if you look at the hexagram, then you can see how that space in the middle is that hidden truth, right? So first, by recognizing truth in other systems, you'll start to be inspired. So we start recognizing that truth deep within us, first through seeing other systems of religion, of science, and other ways of seeing, perceiving it, and realizing that there's truth there. And that flash of knowing that feels like inspiration in the body is how it happened for me. That flash of inspiration, Richard Rudd defines as perceiving reality in distilled form. Like we have a sense of knowing when we've hit upon a truth, right? And when you receive that inspiration in pure form, you can no longer be the same, because that enters into the cells in the same way that breath and oxygen and all the other things that we use to live through breath enters into who we are, right? Through our bloodstream, and then becomes another new cell. In between those inspirations, it can feel like depression. So while you're kind of writing those, because you can't rush inspiration. Those in between times you can feel like being depressed when you're not having that kind of high of being inspired. Again, I've experienced that myself, where it's just, you're just low for no real reason. And the key that Richard Rudd talks about is creativity, and is definitely the key for me, which is why I chose music as a career, and why I choose music when I am looking to integrate and understand my way of being even more. Right. So creativity through voice is how I experience that. So what is bringing you into that sense of creativity? Because it is a very important gift, especially in this ability to move from the shadow of psychosis to inspiration. It unlocks inspiration, and it breaks you out of victimization, because in that inspiration you can't be a victim. You're now the creative force on the other side of that victimization. The challenge of creativity is that you have to be patient, right? You can't force inspiration, and creativity is not going to just it's not going to happen because you want it to happen. So you have to have the patience that to wait in between those heightened states of feeling inspired and creative, and that may feel like depression again if you feel like it should always be that way. Inspiration is spiritual by nature. One of my voice teachers, one of my ones that actually built the seed of how I experience voice in the way that I coach voice, is Betty McDonald. She told me the story. It's like, well, do you believe in God? Yes. Do you believe in the Bible? Yes, especially at the time, I wholeheartedly. So, do you know the story of man, how God created man, and that we're shaped from clay, and then that breath of new life that was breathed in, and then said the thing that will stay with me for the rest of my life. Your breath is the most divine part of you. Trust it. It will teach you. Something I say to my students and clients all the time now. Breath is the most divine part of you. Like, whether that comes from the belief system of Christianity or just a deeper knowing, breath is the most divine part of you. I know that now through experience, because when you are breathing, you can feel how breath, just taking that deep breath and doing breath work. If you haven't done any, I recommend it highly. That it just loosens this need to hold on to false constructs, mental beliefs, and it expands our capacity to love in a way that really nothing else can, because a lot of times there's a reason why we don't love at full capacity from past hurt and trauma and in our experiences of the hurt and trauma that happens to the rest of our fellow humans, right? Like, just that knowledge keeps us from wanting to love at a certain level. So the only thing that's going to loosen that protection and increase the capacity to love and let that love change our being and perception and how we get to interact with life, to me, is breath. I don't really see another way of getting there from there. That true fullness of the gift of inspiration and letting it be the light that drives you from light to light rather than through figuring. So the city is sanctity, and the sanctity is the inspiration of life itself. That's one of the quotes in the book. And it's so huge to me because it's so true. It's so true. And I think we spend so much time looking for the end result. But another quote from the book is, manifestation is unimportant to one truly inspired. And this hits so deep in me because it's something that I'm realizing more and more, that my apathy about results, in business, that's kind of the whole point, right? So lately I have been feeling more and more apathy about results, because I know that the true success, true joy, true peak experiences of life happen when we are enjoying the process, and has nothing to do with the result. Here's another wonderful way that Richard Rudd puts this, is that manifestation is the throwing off of the colors that emanate from our experience of inspiration. And it eventually ends the entire cycle of inspiration when you're getting the sanctity, right? The enlightenment experience. And so eventually all of that inspiration ends in complete mental silence, that remaking and transmutation of experience through breath, right? That's remaking our DNA strands and our structure and who we be, right? Eventually it eliminates the entire history and information of the DNA. And then you get into the experience of being one with the divine. Another quote is, this is experience with no experiencer. So again, a lot of these concepts, if in the city, it feels a little esoteric. It's like, what does that mean? But when you get into this enlightenment kind of full service, full energy um, concepts, it's essentially that. It's that there's not really a way to describe it. So you're going to start to see things that sound paradoxical, right? Because of that truth. Truth does become a little bit paradoxical. Line 5 is voice frequency. This is my purpose line. And I couldn't be happier, right? Voice frequency is the energy coming from the activation sequence and going to the Venus sequence. That energy is in the shadow, the victim, in the gift, the leader. In voice frequency is coming from the fourth line, which is about breath in the respiratory system, to the nervous system, which is voice. And it's because that rhythm and breath of voice, when added tone, creates vibration. And vibration is one of the ways that we use measurements of frequency, right? So when you consider the fifth line, then you get to talk about what is spoken and what is shared, not just in a heart to heart. You can feel somebody even if you're not speaking, right? So it can just be heart to heart silence. But the fifth line is really about speaking that verbally and speaking that in a way that it shows up. I call it from breath to voice is the same thing from idea or things that cannot be, compared and sensed to something that can be sensed, right? That we perceive in our physical world. And so when you hear the voice, you're basically hearing that first step of manifestation from what is unsensed to something that is sensed. And so it's a beautiful way. I say it's the fastest and easiest, maybe not the easiest, but it's the fastest way to practice manifestation without going out and completely getting it wrong. And it's something that's way more vital. If our words can match our intention, then that's the first step of manifestation. Line 5 is talking about the shadow of being a victim, where in the repressive tendency is like being lost in self-pity. And in the reactive tendency, it's making others feel like the victim. And the main block being creating webs of illusions that keep you trapped in your mind. So that victimization of just constantly feeling like you'll never get ahead, that there's something inherently flawed, but you'll never have the possibility of living a full experience of something that you want to live or that you're meant to live even. So almost kind of feeling lost and like you'll never be in the space that you want to be in. When we are in that shadow and that victim mentality, we have a sense of having a whining tone, feeling sorry for yourself, feeling that you are worthy of pity. And on the reactive side, getting angry, belittling others, making others feel small, like they are the victims. When you're in that shadow, you can feel superior in the effort to feel less like a victim. You find somebody who's weaker. And so it becomes this pattern of finding things to criticize and to wrong and belittle in others. Okay. So on the gift side is the leader. So the actual strength and the possibility of that same energy is to see things clearly for yourself. And the outer strength being that you use that clarity to help others. And highest potential is that your practical mind makes you a strong and natural leader. Okay, so the fifth line is always looking to unlock the highest potential in life, and it's looking for practical answers that we can use to survive and to live in full experience. And we get these answers by deep self-awareness and then being able to pass on that the wisdom and knowledge of self-awareness to others. And it allows us to have major insights and breakthroughs that help others break out of victim mentality and helps others awaken to their full experience and full confidence of possibility. So the full function of the practical mind, feeling or finding and freeing others of being codependent victims into authentic and emotionally independent adults. The fifth line, acting through key 61. So in the shadow and that victimization that we are constantly questioning our existence. Why are we here? Why couldn't I have been made differently? Why do I have to be the one that has it the hardest? These are some thoughts that I know I have had. Why does it seem like everybody else is better equipped? Why is everybody so stupid? Why are they always making these mistakes? Different side of the same coin. That critical mind that can be used in a practical way in the gift, right, is turned into something entirely different in that low vibration. But in the high vibration, it can look like having flashes of inspiration of how things can be different and seeing the truth of the highest possibility for somebody, something like a process or the capability of a company or the capability of a country or a community, different levels. But there's kind of these flash insights of a little shift here, this practical thought of this little shift here would bring everything else into an alignment that would be healing and bring others into their full possibility. And so that can look a lot of different ways, but it's essentially that ability to be with yourself and in the breath enough to be in the place of awareness that allows the practicality of a present and pertinent solution to show up in a current experience instead of maybe using intellect to figure out where everybody else went wrong. That's really the shadow nature of that fifth line. If people will stop doing things wrong, and if we just fix all the things that people did wrong, if they were just better people, then we wouldn't have this problem. It's more of a blame and victimizing others. Instead, just getting present to where we are in current reality, then we can get here to there very quickly. A lot of fifth lines have ability to have fixes that can look like almost magic, right? This kind of transmuting, almost quantum leap jump from something that appears unfixable to something that's like truly impactful and can actually sustain in a better reality. If you are enjoying these journeys, please allow me to do your keys. So go ahead to the Gene Keys. That's the first link in the description box, the Gene Keys website, and get your free profile so that you can see what your purpose sphere on the bottom, what that looks like for you. What is that key, which is the first number, and then I got a dot, and then the second number is the line. If you send that to me in that next link, then I will do a video on your purpose sphere. And that's how we're doing these. We're not going in numerological order, obviously, but we are going by the numbers that have been submitted to me and the numbers of people that have come into my experience through the Vocal Superpower chart or as clients. And so I would love to do your key next. So if you go ahead and submit that, then we can get started. So subscribe so you can see the rest. I have interesting conversations with interesting people. I'm going to be talking more details about how to read the Gene Key profile and what are the components of like understanding the Gene Keys. So as I'll do those in like little segments where you can listen to them on the run. So those will be nice and short and sweet. So go ahead and subscribe so you can see what's coming next. I will talk to you guys later. Have a great rest of your day. Now do a vocal contemplation of key 61.